If I've ever been on time, and if I'm on time, it means God's on time. I believe it's going to be today. Listen, I hear that you've been feeling like you can't do this. Like the atmosphere is too heavy, and this warfare is too thick, and like life is too hard, and everything is coming at you at one time. The fiery darts are firing, and they're darty, and they're pointy, and it's a lot to handle. I get it. I do. I understand. But I come to tell you something, and this message is brought to you by the family resemblance. And that might not make sense to you right now, but if you'll stick with me just a minute, I believe that it's going to bless you. I went into my daughter's room today. I'm dressed up. I love this outfit. It reminds me of my best friend who passed about a year ago because she'd always call me B. And I walk in and I ask her to button this little button in the back because vintage tops don't zip. Vintage tops have a little pearl button and a little loop. And I needed her help. So I pull up this beautiful blonde wig and I ask my daughter to fix the back of my shirt. She looks at me from around the button and she says, "You look like Aunt Christy." Well, if you have a sibling, you know that you usually don't feel like you look like your siblings. And don't get me wrong, my sister is stunning. Like, I have a beautiful sister. But she and I never see the resemblance. And everybody else always says, "Gosh, y'all look alike." No, we don't. I have black hair. My sister has blonde hair. And if you really want to be honest, my sister has red hair. And if you want to be honest about me, my hair is more like a brownish black. But my daughter assured me that I looked like my sister. So I walk out of the room. I do a double take in the mirror. And I see it too. And as I'm walking away, I hear the Lord say the family resemblance. He's like, "I need you to go tell them about the family resemblance." And I'm thinking, why do they care if I look like my sister? But I knew where he was going. The family resemblance. Bible says that we're made in the image of God, right? We're made in his image. The Bible also says that he looks down because of Jesus' sacrifice and doesn't see us as us. He doesn't see our junk or our goo or our bad day. He sees us as the righteousness of God. That's a little scary, to be honest, that God looks down and he sees me as righteous. He sees you as righteous. Think of it like this. So if you have an artist, or in my case, an author, right? If you have an author and all you have is all of these manuscripts laid out, and you have a couple that don't belong to that author, and you got some that do, and nobody tells you what the name of the author is. I am a connoisseur of classic literature. I can't tell you about modern day writers, but if you were to lay out a whole bunch of unfound manuscripts of old classic writers, I would be able to tell you, oh my gosh, that's got to be William Faulkner. That's got to be. It's got so many elements, just like As I Lay Dying, look at it. Or if it's a huge run-on sentence and it's very sassy but very southern and very well written and very crisp, Truman Capote. Very easy to pick out the eye of what someone is using with the commas, with the use of space, with the use of word and verbiage, and from the decades, the type of language that we're using. It all would make sense, and I would be able to say, oh, okay, this belongs to this family, this belongs to this one. And that's kind of how we're made in God's image. Like, we're not all the same, but we all have a resemblance, right? We all have this mark on us that says God made this, God did this. We are essentially our Father's sons and daughters. So at the end of the day, if anybody was ever equipped to do this, you are, because you're made in his image. He is victory. He is overcoming. He is all these things. He is peace. He is comfort. And if God is all those things, then there's some of that in you too. And I am sitting here and I am looking at Hebrews 11, and Hebrews 11 ties in faith that you don't see, and also a legacy, and the legacy of remembering who you are. It says this. It says the fundamental fact of existence is that this trust in God, this faith, this one right here, is the firm foundation under everything that makes life worth living. It's our handle on what we can't see. In other words, it's your grip when you got to get one. We need to woo-saw and touch grass. It's the grip that you go find. The act of faith is what distinguished, our ancestors set them apart from the crowd. By faith, we see the world called into existence by God's word. what we see created by what we don't see. It goes on to talk about Abel and his sacrifice, and how his sacrifice was better than Cain's, but it was not what he brought, it was what he believed that made the difference. God says that it is centuries long that we still continue to catch the notice of what he did and of his sacrifice. Centuries later, hear the legacy. By an act of faith, Enoch skipped death completely. It goes on to say that we still think about these things to this day, and that Noah, a ship in the middle of dry land, was warned about something he couldn't see, and he took God at his word, and he became intimate with God because he trusted him. It says, by an act of faith, Abraham said yes to God's call to travel to an unknown place that would come his home. When he left, he had no idea where he was going. Somebody can relate to that. And by an act of faith, he lived in the country promised him as a stranger, camping in tents. Isaac and Jacob did the same, living under the same promise. Abraham did it by keeping his eye on an unseen city with real eternal foundations, a city designed and built by God. And if you skip to the end of the lineages that he's speaking on, it says, by an act of faith, Rahab the Jericho harlot welcomed the spies and escaped the destruction that came on those who refused to trust God. Rahab is a great-great-great-grandma of Jesus. And they go on to talk about all these people and all of these prophets and all these things and all these kingdoms that toppled over and all at the hand of God and all the promises that came to pass. But if you listen for an overtone of something in here, it's not only faith in what we can't see, but it's also hearing that there's a family resemblance, that all of these people had something in common. It was their faith in God, being made in his image, the ability to continue even when you wanted to quit, journeying on even when it felt like life was kicking your tail. So if I could tell you anything today, I'd say, hey, you look a lot like Jesus today. You look a lot like your father. You look a lot like him today. And just like my daughter told me today, I see it looking in this camera. I do look like my sister. I might not see it all the time, but I do. There is a family resemblance, and I'm sure I look like my mama, and I know I look like my great-great-aunt. I look like my great-grandma. I resemble a little bit of everyone. And when there's a resemblance and there is an ancestry, you're going to resemble them somehow. Sometimes in personality, sometimes in the way you laugh, sometimes in the way your eyes are, your lips, whatever it is. But today, that little thing that my daughter said just reminded me just how much we resemble God and how often we forget. If you've forgotten, maybe it's time to look in the mirror and remind yourself that you are made in the image of God. He sees you as the righteousness of God. And if he is victorious, so are you, because you're his kid. And that if you can go into the throne room, boldly, a stranger is not going to come in my room boldly. You know who comes in my room boldly? Jack, Ben, Emmy, my children. Pop open this door. Just come right in and take what they need, and that's boldly. So I want to remind you right now, as you're going through this and the warfare and how crazy everything is right now, I know it is. I want you to take a breath, woosah with me. And I need you to know that you look like your father because you're your father's kid. And God instilled in you the very thing you would need to face everything you're ever going to face. Just like he did everybody that we just talked about. Just like he has ever since time began. And even though we're covered in the blood, that blood also courses through our veins, because who do you think made us? It's in your DNA to succeed. It's in your DNA to win. It's in your DNA to be okay. It's in your DNA to be, it is well. What can man do to me? It is well with you. And it's in your DNA. Don't forget.